IVM.
Have you ever wondered why women don't do more crime? Well, we're here to tell you. There's misconduct all the time. Women are thieves and murderers.
That's gross misconduct.
Con artists, money launderers.
Criminal misconduct.
Financial fraud that's hard to track.
Takes some planning, but still misconduct.
Even breaching a contract.
Well, that's more civil though.
It's misconduct. Misconduct. We tell you all about women that suck. Things that make you say, what the? It's misconduct.
Hello, and welcome to Misconduct. We are a podcast about Indian women who happen to be criminals. Some fictional ones, maybe also. Who knows? My name is Raghavi.
And I am Nisha. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about Kannagi, a woman who stuck by her man through thick and thin and was rewarded for that loyalty with his death. Over a serious miscommunication issue, Kannagi found herself without a husband, and to avenge the act, she, wait for it, set the whole city of Madurai on fire. So, Kannagi is many things to many people. To some, she is a symbol of resilience and vigilantism. To others, it's a symbol of chastity and loyalty. There are many Tamil communities that treat her as a goddess, and some very small percentage of people in this world believe that maybe she's kind of kooky, because she brought down an entire city with her actions.
That is right. For those not in the know, Kannagi is a Tamil heroine, so to speak. And since we won't be speaking about our other Tamil heroine anytime soon, wink, wink, Jayalalitha, wink, wink, we figured it would be a good idea to pick someone who we both admire and also kind of wonder if all the large-scale property damage that she inflicted was justified in any way whatsoever. There's also a lot of speculation over whether Kannagi was, even a real person, who she was, where did she come from, what's her deal. We'll get into all that and a little bit more.
Perfectly summed up. Just to clarify, people do die in this episode, because Kannagi is burning down a city. So as we always say, this content is not suitable for children and for adults. Listener discretion is advised.
All right, let's get into it. So before we get to Kannagi herself, let's talk about two important things. The city of Madurai and what is arguably, the most famous Tamil epic that was ever written called Silampathirakam.
Yeah, this is the context section, guys. It's my favorite because I always feel hella enriched. So take it away, Raghavi.
First, Madurai. So the city of Madurai is old. It's old as hell. It is speculated Madurai first became a real city in the 3rd century BC. 3rd century BC, to clarify, was over 5,000 years ago. So what was happening in the Earth's documented history 5,000 years ago? A bunch of things. Basically, civilizations were flourishing. China established its first real empire, and it was subsequently taken over by the Han dynasty almost immediately. In the Mediterranean, the Carthage Empire and the Roman Republic were just kind of losing it. They were fighting it out nonstop for a while, and eventually Rome would go on to become a superpower. Greece overthrew the Macedonian Empire around this time, and then they occupied the entire Eastern Mediterranean for a long time. And when we talk about 5,000 years ago, like people were doing stuff, things were being invented. Like Archimedes invented the water screw, and that changed crop irrigation as we know it, or at least how people in the 3rd century understood crop irrigation. The first Roman sundial was constructed, which changed how we looked at time. At time, guys, the thing that our entire planet runs on was changed. Also, silk was exported to Europe from China for the first time, marking one of the first in a long-term partnership between the East and the West, where the West exploited all the resources and manpower and cultural riches of the East. And in turn, the East got to be enslaved for centuries together and have all their indigenous people murdered in the millions and told that they were unworthy of basic human rights.
Yeah, which obviously left no lasting repercussions.
Things are also happening in India. Ashoka the Great ruled over this incredibly massive Maurya empire. It covered just about everything we know of the Indian subcontinent today, except for the southern states of today's Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Kerala. So these three states had their own thing going on. In South India at this time, there were three glorious empires that reigned over the region. First is the Cheras. They basically covered modern day Kerala and the Malabar coastline. The second is the Cholas. These guys covered the entire Kaveri River Valley. So a lot of the temple jewelry and stuff that we see today is inspired from this kingdom because they believed in precious stones and jewels as a symbol of power and prestige. So rubies, emeralds, diamonds, like those were a really, really big deal for them. And then lastly, we have the Pandyas. They primarily reigned over Madurai and Tirunelveli. And this empire was also pretty close to the coastline. So one of their income sources was pearls. So they really engaged in pearl diving. Remember these details for later. Yes, so together these regions were sort of known as the three crowned kings or the Moovendar. And the region was also known as the Tamilagam. And we're not saying that the Tamilagam did not have like smaller kingdoms or tribes or identities in any way. In fact, a huge part of Tamilagam and Tamil identity at the time was actually in much smaller units where there'd be local chiefs that would rule over the whole area. And, that's what long-lasting rulers did. They learned to use diversity as a plus point for better administration.
Yay. But before we go further, we just want to clarify something at the get-go. This is not like a Tamil Pride podcast. Raghavi and I are Tamil by birth, but we barely grew up in the country. Our identities are Tamil, of course, because that's all we know. But we know a very specific, privileged and curated form of Tamil culture and history. And it's not because we weren't like taught about all of this as children, far from that. But instead, we feel that Tamil identity, history, culture, and practices are just so vast and expanding for centuries together that it's almost impossible to know all of it.
Yeah, that's right. And like it's impossible to know all of it, even though Tamil history is so well documented and codified. Ancient Tamil sources, as we know it, date back to the 5th century BC. And they're like equal parts, factual, anecdotal, religious, mythological, like they're all sorts of things. So much of it is oral history that's just been put together, into words much later. And these sources are scattered everywhere, like even as far as Thailand and Singapore and Malaysia.
Yeah. So the stories we tell you today may have like many more rich layers that we are not fully aware of. Plus, like certain eras of our history are kind of like a mishmash of whoever was identified as the authority at that time. And so we can't necessarily do much more than just speculate about it today. But also at the same time, enjoying how rich and diverse all of this culture and history is.
Yep. But also, of course, we are, and we've always said this, we're open to learning more, always. We can only put so much in this like 45-minute podcast. So please hit us up with any information that you have, anything that you may have heard, even, like family stories that may have been passed down and aren't really documented anywhere. And we love doing that research. And we're very happy to hear all this.
Absolutely.
Yes, but Madurai, let's get back to it. The recorded history of Madurai apparently goes back, like I said, to the 3rd century BC. Now, this has actually been confirmed by the Archaeological Survey of India. But please remember, recorded history is always changing as we find, new usable evidence. So always take this sort of information with a truckload of salt. It could change tomorrow. Effectively, Madurai has been a modern settlement for a long, long time along the river Vaigai. It was actually given the name Tunga Nagaram at some point, which translates to the city that never sleeps. And fun fact, I just learned this. Frank Sinatra first coined the phrase, the city that never sleeps, for his song, New York, New York.
Ah, cool.
Yeah, I think it was very sweet of him to pay his regards to like the grand old city of Madurai. That was really cool.
Well, I don't think that.
Historically, Madurai has been the capital of many, many empires. The most famous one, of course, being that of the Pandyas that we mentioned earlier. The Cholas also eventually took over the city when they ruled the south.
Yeah, so generations of civilizations and kingdoms have built the city of Madurai, and it's supremely well planned. So the city that we know today is basically like 2 squares inside of each other with the Meenakshi temple in the middle. Basically, what I'm saying is you can't get lost as long as you find one of those main roads.
So yes, Madurai, the city, was really known through the centuries for many, many things, including its architecture and temples and food and riches. And most importantly, at least for this episode, the city was really incredibly important as this sort of central melting point for Tamil literature. So this whole period, which is called the Sangam period, which was just before the Pandyas and the Cholas reigned across South India, there was this massive assembly of the most influential Tamil scholars of the time. And the Sangam scholars had basically and their written works essentially have inspired so many social and political and religious dogma of their time. And we're not kidding. Tamil literature has covered everything from politics to religion, customs, architecture, agriculture, weaving, precious gems, transport, building construction, pottery, trade, even pearl diving. It's just...
Damn.
It's everywhere, okay? And there are some that think that the Sangam was maybe not a real or historical event, and they do have some evidence to prove that. But this entire episode is just speculation. So let's just roll with it, guys.
So that's pretty much all you need to know about Madurai. Oh, I think one more thing. My dad is from Madurai.
So is
Also
mine.
yours. Hey!
Yeah.
Okay, now that's all you need to know about Madurai. So next up, the Tamil epic Silampathirakam. So this epic is presumed to be like an old bardic tale thought to have been first told by a monk named Ilango Attikal. This is disputed, of course, because all historical accounts are disputed.
Yes.
The name Silampathirakam translates to the tale of an anklet. So it's likely composed in 5th century BC sometime and passed on orally through the ages. In the era of the rise of the Sangam literature, that was when, for the first time, the story was written down as a poem. So the story does not really reference Ilango. So I have no idea how archaeologists and linguists put this together. So just kudos to them. The story is written as a poem with a total of about 5,730 lines. It's like a really old and ancient form of Tamil that neither Raghavi or I can understand. I don't think our parents can comprehend that kind of classical Tamil.
No, dude. I can't even understand the Tamil they speak on Tamil news channels. It's
yes.
I'm always looking for it'll be like Jaya TV or Jaya News, and I'm always looking for the one English word that they use when they're reporting, just so I can be or when they put up pictures, I'm oh, thank you for not putting up a stock picture. I'm really glad you put up this picture of Trump. Now I know who you're talking about.
So Silampathirakam is known to be one of the earliest Hindu Jain epics. There's many others such as Manimekale, Balayapati and Kundalakesi, all covering epic stories that have been passed on from generation to generation. Actually, Manimekale is kind of an offshoot of Silampathirakam. It's like a fan fiction, I guess, if you will. It's 50 Shades of ancient Tamil era.
Disgusting.
So some scholars have gone so far to call Silampathirakam the equivalent of the Greek epic Iliad. In the 19th century, a Tamil scholar named Swaminatha Iyer recovered written versions of the epic found on ancient palm leaf manuscripts. So in 1892, he published the first full edition of the epic as a book. And this kind of gave it a mass appeal. So pretty soon it picked up traction because it was like an epic tale of love, loyalty, betrayal, rejection, happiness, and I guess pain once it was translated into English. But what is Silampathirakam about? It's about the story of Our Lady Kannagi.
Yay!
But before that, let's take a quick break because commercials. Please don't leave. We shall be back.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring your very heartcake chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
We are back. So we are talking about Silampathirakam. As we get started, let me tell you the first part of the story of Silampathirakam and the tale of Kannagi. So Kannagi was the daughter of a ship captain, trader and merchant. She was originally from a town called Poombuhar or Puhar, which is a coastal city in the Mayiladuthurai district of Tamil Nadu. You'll notice that a lot of these names of the places that we mention in this epic, they're actually real places in Tamil Nadu. So Puhar was once a port city that served as the capital for the Tamalagam kings of the early Chola Empire. Anyway, Kannagi was extremely rich and well off. Her parents were super respected and affluent people. She was also extremely pleasant and beautiful. In this epic, she is described as, and this is very roughly translated, she is Lakshmi herself, goddess of peerless beauty that rose from the lotus and chaste as the immaculate Arundhati.
Wow.
So, yeah, for those not in the know, these are all names of like classical, gorgeous Hindu goddesses. So, I guess it's safe to say she was hella hot. So, now Kannagi, as all women of the time, was married off to a man. This man was called Kovalan. Kovalan's family were also sea traders at the time, so the families considered it to be like a perfect match. Kannagi considered Kovalan to be a handsome young man with like a promising future. And the epic describes him as the god of love himself, the incomparable Murugan. So, Murugan is another name for the Hindu god Kartikeya, who is apparently extremely handsome. Anyway, Kannagi was madly in love with Kovalan, and he was in love with her as well. So, the texts say that they spent many months together in absolute bliss, never leaving each other's side. To quote the text itself, and this makes me gag just a little bit, like snakes coupled in the heat of passion, or Kama and Rati smothered in each other's arms, so Kovalan and Kannagi lived in happiness past speaking, spent themselves in every pleasure, thinking, we live on earth but a few days.
Dude, that is so, it's so hedonistic. You know, if I did that all day, just rolled around like this, I mean, for one, I wouldn't have a job. And also people would be like, they would call me a pothead or something. Like,
what is she on?
good for them. Good for them.
Sure. They're like those one like really hot couple that we all follow on Instagram.
Yep.
We hate to look at them, but we can't stop.
They have a joint
It's
Instagram
them.
account because of
Yes,
Yep.
they do.
Yep.
So, in this time, while the newlyweds were newlywedding, Kovalan's trades were extremely prosperous, and the couple bought a house and they lived very happily together until ... we meet Madhavi.
Giuseppe.
It's the Italian gasp.
It's actually Giuseppe, but it's stuck now. Too late. Giuseppe.
So Madhavi was the daughter of a famed dancer, and she too was a brilliant dancer herself. She was trained in dance, singing, literature as a young girl, and she was hella hot also.
That's true. She was a beauty. How does she fit into the story? I think you can sort of see where this is going. One day, Kovalan and Kannagi decided to go see a dance performance during the spring festival. Who was the dancer? Can anybody guess? It's Madhavi. Madhavi was the dancer.
Giuseppe.
Giuseppe. At this performance, Madhavi enchanted Kovalan. And at this point, he decided he was going to ditch Kannagi and go be with her. And there's this whole elaborate story about how Kovalan meets Madhavi again and starts living with her, but that's not really relevant to Kandagi's story. The story sort of goes two ways from here. Once, Kovalan moves in with Madhavi and just lives with her for years. What happens is either Kovalan sort of spent a lot of money on Madhavi, like lavishly, because he was hooked like a junkie to whatever Madhavi's charm was. Or it's also said that Madhavi's mother may have scammed Kovalan of all his money. So basically, he was spending a ton of money on either Madhavi or Madhavi's mom. But what happens in either of those instances is that somebody is left without any money to her name. And that person is Kannagi.
Oh no.
Yeah. So throughout this time, poor woman, she's just basically becoming destitute. And she's still pining for him though. And throughout this time, like a lot of Kannagi's friends are telling her, dude, can you just dump him? But obviously she being in love, she decides to stick it through and just waits for him to come back the whole time.
Yeah, this is all like nice and romantic for its time and its era, I suppose. However, someone known to you is going through this. Please relay the words of the great scholar, Doja Cat.
I'm not gonna kill your car. I'll call your fudging mom. You should have paid my rent. Go get a fudging job.
This is our second Doja Cat reference. In like 3 episodes. We just need to just stop.
Never.
Indeed, never. So yes, in the years that Kovalan lived with Madhavi, he and by extension Kannagi basically became penniless.
Hmm.
And at some point, Kovalan was like, I should leave Madhavi. And there are a few reasons why he does it. First, he likely discovered Madhavi's mother's scams. And he was like, hey, that's not cool. It's also likely that he came to the conclusion that Madhavi was cheating on him. That is just something I guess he's felt for a while. Also, one day she sings a song. Like Madhavi was singing a song about a lost lover. And like Kovalan just got super insecure about it. So, like, considering all of these traits, I'm not very sure how we should look at Kovalan and be like, that is the ideal man. So he just packed his bags and he went back to Kannagi and he left Madhavi. So remember, this is a story about loyalty and chastity. Loyalty and chastity from Kannagi's side, not Kovalan's.
Yeah.
So of course, Kannagi, because she was so virtuous and, she was still in love with him, she took him back. But Kovalan has no money now. He's penniless. So how are they going to live? And this is when they decide that they're going to travel to Madurai, like most likely find a job or some other trade he can do to bring back the riches. Before he leaves, though, Kannagi gives him one of her last possessions, which is a bejeweled anklet.
Aha, that's the name, the tail of the anklet.
Yes, it's right. My love, you are so perceptive.
Yeah.
So once they're in Madurai, Kovalan leaves Kannagi for a bit and he tries to find a way to sell this anklet. He finds a goldsmith there and, decides to sell the anklet to him. But drama ensues.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. The goldsmith that he wants to sell this anklet to was none other than ... the chief goldsmith of the king of Madurai. And yes, the king of Madurai at the time was Neduncherian of the Pandya dynasty. Did I pronounce that right?
We'll get someone.
Someone
to
will tell us.
correct
Mom.
on Instagram.
Yeah, mom, tell me.
But okay, so all of this kind of connects back to what we were talking about before.
It does.
Like the Pandya dynasty and
That's correct. That's right. Yes, my
full
love.
circle.
You are truly the biggest cheerleader for me and this podcast. And it's very lovely. Thank you. So this goldsmith that Kovalan goes to, turns out he had also made an anklet, 2 anklets, of course, because you have 2 feet, very similar to this for the queen of Madurai. And also this goldsmith, again, ... had stolen one of those anklets for his wife just the previous day before Kovalan came to him. I know this is super convoluted, okay, but just stick with us. Apparently, the goldsmith's wife really loved the queen's anklets and she wanted one of her own. So this goldsmith, who has the ability to make another anklet, was like, no, I'm going to steal the queen's anklet only. And it so happens that the anklet that Kovalan brought, which actually belonged to Kannagi, looked an awful lot like the queen's anklet. And it even made jingling noises exactly like the queen's anklet.
Yes.
So the goldsmith was like, okay, sure, this is my window. I'm just going to tell the king that Kovalan stole the anklet. And he marched right up to the palace to tell the king this news. So the king was obviously furious. Why would he not be? He said, guards, seize him. And
But in Tamil.
But in Tamil. That's fair. I don't even know how to translate that. I'm not going to start.
Nope, not even trying.
Yes, not even trying. So he got Kovalan to appear before the king. I want you to know that the king didn't ask any questions here. Okay, he didn't ask Kovalan anything. In fact, Kovalan maintained his innocence throughout. But the king didn't even consult with the queen, who was basically the star witness of this case. He didn't cross-examine the goldsmith who had brought him the anklet. I'm not sure cross-examination existed as a concept, but still, the least you could have been is like, excuse me, where did you find this? Yeah. And he didn't ask Kovalan why he must have stolen it, or even how. How did the queen's guards not see if they had spotted someone like Kovalan in the palace, right? Maybe work on your security, king. That's probably more important. And he didn't even bother to inspect the anklet or ask the queen to do so, right? Nothing.
He didn't even ask Kovalan for a proof of purchase, just one receipt or one credit card statement. And all of this is cleared up.
Exactly. I absolutely agree. That makes so much sense in the time period that we're talking about. Instead, what did the king do? He just presumed that Kovalan was guilty and sentenced him to death. And Kovalan was beheaded immediately. Immediately, the poor man died on the spot. And what happened to the anklet? Well, the king took it and gave it to his wife.
So at the same time, someone informs Kannagi that her husband has been slain without a trial. And at first she is kind of distraught. She's inconsolable. She can't dream of this life without her husband, right? She's been waiting for him for so long. She's been so loyal to him. So she almost faints when she hears the news for the first time. She just can't believe it. And then out of nowhere, this like bubble of rage just builds up in her and it becomes bigger and bigger. And it's just like a violent storm taking over her. And then she says, "Who the hell does this king fellow think he is?"
I think he thinks he is the king.
Yes. Fair. But Kannagi is like filled with rage upon hearing the news of her husband. And so at this point, she's no longer that young, loyal wife. She has become a widow and she effectively has nothing to lose. So she just marches down to the palace in Madurai to confront the king. On her way there, she's telling all of the people of the city that her husband was unjustly killed. And they're all asking her, "Kannagi, how can you prove that your husband did steal the queen's anklet?" To which Kannagi says, "I'm holding the other anklet in my damn hand. That's evidence enough." And the townspeople are a little bit confused. But then, like, that's not how mob mentality works. And they don't question it. And they're like, "Oh, let's go to the palace." So they march down and oh, by the way, all this time, she is like holding her anklet like, high in the air and pointing in the direction of the palace where the king is staying. And she's clad in like a simple sari, no embellishments because she broke. Her hair is open and it's loose. There's no jewelry, no kumkum because now she is a widow. So keep note of this image because it's super symbolic.
Yep, that's right. So when Kannagi reached the palace gates, she announced, like, "Your king has unjustly killed my husband. Let me in and I will prove his innocence." And the guards were like, "Man, this lady looks really angry. We should let her in." So Kannagi gets into the palace and she confronts the king for his actions. And the king basically says, "Bruh, Kovalan stole my queen's anklet and that's why this happened." And Kannagi says, "No, my anklet is unique and I can prove it because my anklet has rubies in it." And then she smashes the anklet on the ground and lo and behold,
out come rubies.
Exactly. But, and here's the twist. The king says, "You prove nothing to me, lady. My wife's anklets have pearls in them. And here, I shall break my super expensive anklet to prove this to you." And the king smashes the anklet to the floor. And Nisha, can you guess what falls out of the anklet?
Out come rubies. Again.
Yes, because the anklet is actually Kannagi's.
Dun,
Giuseppe.
dun, dun.
Oh, I like yours better. Why did I say Giuseppe? Oh, fine. What happens after this? Well, we'll take a little break and then we shall find out.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On This Round is on me, Shaili Chopra shares with Gauri how they hit 750 million on She the People TV. We have a new show, The Last Brand Standing. Anupam Gupta and Ambi Parmeshwar get together and discuss some of the biggest and most public feuds in Indian brand history. Do check that out. Taste the lip-smacking palette of Karachi with Bilal Hassan on Naan Curry with Sadaf and Archit. On Misconduct, learn all about Dawood Ibrahim's sister Hasina Parker with Ragvi and Nisha. Is the Indian Constitution queer-friendly? Find out on the Longest Constitution podcast with Priya Mirza. And on Audio Gyan, Harish S., design head at Cred, talks about his Carnatic rock band and design as an art form. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Seat, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intuit India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back from the break. So when we left off, Kannagi had just proven to the entire court of Madurai that the king had unjustly killed her husband with no trial and no evidence. And when that happened, the entire court was silent, like not a pin drop could be heard. And suddenly the king yelled, "What have I done? I have killed an innocent man. How can I ever atone for the sin?" And the king just collapsed. He died basically from shame and grief, and he just passed away on the spot. But the thing is, even with this outcome, Kannagi was not happy.
Why not? Like, this is what I don't understand. Like, you've got a life for a life, right? Justice is paid. So,
Okay, first off, I don't subscribe to that school of thought.
yes.
Yes, a life for a life presumes that like people are not capable of like change or rehabilitation, which I think is a very cynical sort of way to look at the justice system.
I suppose. But I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I disagree with this. And I feel like we've disagreed on this
Yeah.
before as well.
Yeah. I mean, we have recorded evidence of us disagreeing on this. Quick plug, please listen to our podcast on Sain and Malika for a very basic non-argument of sorts. It's a very polite discussion that we have on the topic of the death penalty. So please feel free to listen to that.
Cool. So Kannagi was not really happy about how things went down. I think she assumed that she could personally kill the king herself. Maybe that would have helped her. Of course,
I don't know.
This is us speculating, so we have no proof that she thought this.
Listen,
Really,
the amount of stuff I've read about Kannagi in the last like week and so, I feel like she's my best friend. We're so close now. Nisha, our friendship, you and me, it's nothing compared to this 5,000-year-old woman and me, our friendship. No, but I feel like she would really not have rested until she felt that like level of bloodlust sort of.
yeah,
sated.
she's gotten into that phase now, right?
Yeah, she's gotten there. Yeah, she
Yeah.
full 180, like 180, 360. No, 180. I was correct.
180, 360 is going
Yes.
back to where you are.
That is accurate. Yes, go ahead, please.
So, what did she do in this rage? She walked up to the palace gates and she announced, "I am the chaste and loyal wife of an innocent man. As you have taken away my one love, let this city also burn in the flames of my anger." And then she set the city on fire.
Yep, that she did.
But Kannagi had a moral code. She let the children, the old, and the disabled be spared. So one thing we should remember is like when Kannagi was marching down the streets of Madurai, she noticed that so many people followed her. But not one of these people had stepped up and protected her husband when he was like accused of stealing from the queen. Not
Right.
one of these like men or women asked the question, where is the proof? So this actually made Kannagi like particularly angry, like that the
Yeah.
entire city of Madurai, which is like a symbol of power and culture and justice, it's a mighty empire. Not once did anyone come to the aid of an innocent man. So, I mean, innocent until proven guilty, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So the only logical conclusion for her, I guess, was at that time, you know what? I have to burn this place down. And from its
Yeah.
ashes, perhaps a better civilization will emerge.
Yeah, now that you mentioned this, I guess her vendetta wasn't specifically against the king then. I mean, his death wouldn't have really served any purpose because while he dealt
Fair.
that blow and killed Kovalan, her husband,
Yeah.
the entire city watched it happen. So,
Right.
in her head, it was like, everybody sucks so
Yeah.
hard right now. So,
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess then that argument doesn't really stand, right? When we talk about life for a life. It's not, because for her,
It was a lot
it's
more bloodthirsty than that.
Yeah, yeah.
Fair.
Now, today's situation, this would not be acceptable. I know this may come off as a controversial opinion, but I would dare to say it. It's not okay to burn down a city if you are annoyed. You can't even burn like a piece of paper in your house anymore without like smoke alarms going off.
That's
so,
true.
but for Kannagi, this felt like her only means of justice, and I highly doubt that Madurai in the 5th century BC had an organized firefighting team. So I guess the fire spread much faster than it would have today. So legend has it that within just hours, the entire city was burnt to the ground. So to be honest, like a question that comes to my mind when I read out this part or when I like think about this part is whatever Kannagi did, would it be considered a crime today?
Yes, Disha. Obviously.
I mean, yeah, the fire I get, but
all of it. So, I mean, okay. Kannagi, of course, if the authorities could find her, she would most likely be charge sheeted for like a few things. First of all, there's this cute little section of the Indian Penal Code which talks about mischief.
oh,
I know, it's literally
Like
called
Loki.
mischief. Like Loki, it's little mischief. So sections 425 to 440 talk about acts of mischief and, punishments that apply to it. So section 425 generally defines mischief as whoever with the intent to cause or knowing that he's likely to cause some sort of wrongful loss or damage to the public or any person and causes the destruction of some sort of property or injures it, he is said to have committed mischief. Now, I've really broken it down quite a bit. But broadly, we can say Kannagi committed some mischief. Right? So, I mean, the thing is, the general idea of mischief, it sounds really adorable. And to be fair, the punishment under that is just 3 months and a fine. The general definition. But the rest of the IPC talks about a bunch of other kinds of mischief, so to speak. Mischief caused by fire or like an explosive substance. With the intent to destroy houses. Mischief causing death of animals, causing injury, like public roads and rivers and drainage systems. And lastly, mischief resulting in death or hurt.
Okay.
Now, the last one can land you in prison for up to 5 years.
Oh.
For each instance of mischief.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So even if she killed 1,000 people, that's 5,000 years in jail, most likely.
Oh, no, that's her
yes.
prime years in life.
Yes, of course. I'm sure. Actually, that would be now. She would have just gotten out of jail now. If she had actually been convicted.
God.
Yeah. So the thing is, of course, that's not the only thing. There's also the murders that she would have been found guilty for outside of the mischief angle. I would predict that she would have received the equivalent of a death sentence today.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah. Also, who actually burned down the city? Because, I mean, if Kannagi did it herself, then we'll have to assume she was one of the first X-Men or something. The other alternative is that, she had henchmen that, went around to set the city on fire. How did she have it? How could she afford them? I don't know those things. But if there were people who helped her with it, there's also a charge for criminal conspiracy, incitement of violence, there's a chunk of other things. So add a bunch of more jail time. So I apologize. She would have not been out of jail right now.
Oh,
She'd
yeah, that's
still
true.
be in there. Yes. And of course, people who took orders from her would likely also.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Does it count if maybe they weren't henchmen? Maybe they were just other pissed off people and her
Yeah, it's still a Batman.
rousing speech. I see.
Rousing speech. She just said, no, screw you all. Aha, light a match.
Yes.
That's basically what it was. There was no speech to it.
I suppose. So, but of course, all of this would apply if they found her, right? Because where did she go after all of this? She ascended to heaven, where I guess Madurai police jurisdiction does not apply.
I would say that is fair.
So after burning down the whole city, Kannagi leaves Madurai behind her and starts walking. So there are some variations to the story, but we're going to go with this one. She walks for a couple of days and she finally reaches the mountains of the Chera Empire. That's the last empire that we had mentioned. So there she is greeted by the gods and goddesses of Hindu faith. And these gods tell her that she deserves to ascend to heaven. And she leaves with them to the afterlife where she meets Kovalan and she's reunited with him forever. So when the kings of the Chera Empire heard this story, they decided to immortalize Kannagi as a goddess as well. They go to the mountains and bring back a stone in which they carve the image of Kannagi. And since then, certain parts of South India, Kannagi is worshipped as goddess Kannagi Amman or Patini.
Yeah.
She's particularly famous goddess in Sri Lanka as well. So among both Tamil Hindus and the Sinhalese Buddhists. Basically, this story touches upon all three kingdoms that we were talking about and beyond, clearly. So
Clearly, yeah. And Kannagi's story is actually immortalized in so many other ways. For one, there are a million movies about her, about the actual story as well as adaptations. The first one, which is a Tamil movie, came out in 1942, before independence, which is crazy. There's also a hella giant statue of Kannagi that was built on the shores of the Marina Beach in Chennai. And you can't miss it. It's massive. It's right there. It was built in 1968 by the then Chief Minister Annadurai of the DMK. So he wanted a 10-foot statue of Kannagi to be built on top of a podium, along with 9 other famous Tamil literature characters. There was a huge push at that time to especially for younger people to really start appreciating Tamil literature. It was a really big deal, and kudos to the government for that. In 2001, however, the statue was temporarily taken down. Why? Because Jayalalitha came to power. That's it. I'm not saying any more about that. She came to power and she was like, I don't like this. And everybody was like, okay, take it up. In 2006, when Karunanidhi of the DMK came back into power and became chief minister, he was like, get that statue back up. So that's how we ended up with the statue back there. It's a beautiful sight, honestly. It's really pretty to look at.
Yeah. So you remember like when we described Kannagi's march through the city of Madurai, right? She was dressed plainly, no jewelry, nothing fancy. She just had her hand pointed to the palace,
Yeah.
one hand holding up the anklet, and her pose is basically demanding justice from the one person who could give her that justice. So this is the exact pose that the Kannagi statue is made in. She's holding her anklet high and pointing it at the king, and her face and her demeanor is just like demanding justice.
Yeah, it's a really regal looking statue,
Yeah.
honestly. It's beautiful to see. Oh, by the way, when Jayalalitha had the statue removed and she came into power, a lot of the newspapers at the time claimed that she did it because a lorry ran into the Kannagi statue pedestal and chipped it or something. In which case we say replace the pedestal. Why remove the statue? But one thing that I thought was like when we were reading up about this, of course, unlike our other subjects, we haven't really found like media reports, like
Right.
speculation about her life, who she was.
Mhm.
Have you thought about how the media would have reported about her if it was around at the time?
Actually, forget around at that time. Let's just think about like if something like this happened today, how would
Mhm.
we the same? Because at the time it's hard for me to speculate, but today I can
Of course,
say
yeah.
like there are a couple of ways that this would happen. One, there would have been some media outlets that would outrightly just vilify her. They would probably paint her as some kind of terrorist, and they would probably like call for her immediate death.
Mhm.
And or they might be like painting, and I mean there might be some media houses that just kind of paint her as a hero, but I feel like this might be coming through with like some political agenda. So there's one on that, there's something on that side.
Right.
Then you'll have certain media houses that would just call her a crazy person. Of
Hmm.
course, there is a lot to be said about how mental health affects people who commit crimes, but these media outlets will not pick up on that nuance. They would just call her crazy because she's a woman,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. The world is terrible.
Yep. Of course, that is one extreme. There could be that some outlets would see her as like a feminist icon. In fact, I think
Mhm.
many publications, even today, they kind of look at her as a woman that was pushed into her actions. And
Mhm.
I guess there is some truth in that as well.
Yep.
I think the final thing to consider is that no media house outside of South India would be bothered by this whole debacle.
That's fair. Yeah.
Oh, unless like Bollywood wanted to exploit the story in some way.
Hmm.
So that's
I guess so.
yeah. Speaking
Yeah.
of Bollywood, in
Okay.
2021 sometime, it was announced that a Kannagi movie may be in the works in Bollywood.
Oh.
Yeah. Can you take one guess as to who might play Kannagi?
I don't know, man. Who's left? Kangna Ranaut, I guess. But like that wouldn't happen. That's kind of stupid, though. Is it Kangna Ranaut?
It might be.
Are you? What?
Yeah, apparently after playing Jayalalitha in her new movie, she kind of expressed her interest in playing Kannagi as well.
Are you? Okay. Oh, okay. Rant time. Okay, listen.
Yes.
I'm not the kind of person that wants to prevent like good actors from picking up roles they like.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't want to play like this weird South Indian ethnic card or like a Tamil card. I don't want to do any of those things, okay? But the fact is, Kangna Ranaut was born in Himachal Pradesh and she's from a Rajput family.
Mm-hmm.
And like, just think about the other way, okay? When Deepika Padukone, a South Indian woman, played Padmavati, a likely fictional Rajput princess, you know, nobody could really agree on whether even Padmavati was a real person or not.
Yeah.
But the fact that Deepika Padukone played her pissed off so many people. People were just so angry at her. There were death threats out there.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind, I mean, and considering the fact that Tamil representation is so important
Yes.
here, I mean, it's a little upsetting. So
I think more importantly, like South Indian epics have never really been given the same attention as epics based in the North, like Ramayana or Mahabharata, I guess.
Yep.
But by the same logic, I would expect that Indian filmmakers, when making films about South Indian epics, would cast South Indian actors because, like you said, it's a huge part of representation. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think I can say with like certainty that I will never watch a Kannagi movie without a South Indian actress playing that part.
Yeah, I know we sound a little bit like scary about this, but like you have to understand that Silampathirakam is like, it is one of the oldest and greatest and most well-known Tamil epics. And you know what? What you said about not watching a Kannagi movie without a South Indian actors, I wouldn't even pirate that movie. You know what I would do instead? I would go back to watch both part 1 and part 2 of Bahubali.
Yes.
Because at the very least, even if nothing else happens, even if it's absolute nonsense, at least at the end, there is an oddly homoerotic scene where these two naked, oily men are fighting it out, and you're just like, wow, this is a 25-minute fight scene. I am into it.
It is 25 minutes. No, you're exactly.
I feel like it was. I think the movie is 3 hours and something. So yes, guys, please watch Bahubali.
3 hours and 25 minutes.
You can even skip
minutes.
Skip the first movie. There's no point in the first movie.
Hey, no,
watch the last. It. No, wait. I mean, for those who specifically want that scene, just watch the last 30 minutes. Not even the last 5 minutes. Oh, Bahubali wins. Oh, Mahendra Bahubali. But just watch the bit with Rana Dagwati. Man, he's so hot. But that's the end of our episode. What we're going to do now is what we've always done, which is transition to a musical recap. Nisha, would you like to take it away?
Fell in love with that dreamy boy. His words of love would make me coy. Soul as pure as a soft white dove. Did I mention that we're in love? The wedding was great. He took me out on dates. Tonight we're going to see the dancer. What? Now he's gone. My friends ask me to move on. He'll be back. That's my only answer. Wait, he's back but he's broke. I should have known. I'll give him my anklet so he'll get alone. We're shifting towns. I see him grin. I just can't wait for our life to begin.
What? The king did what?
Yay! I loved it.
Thanks, girl. Oh, by the way, when I was writing the song, I was speaking to my my grandma about this, about like Kannagi and like the statue at Marina Beach. Mm-hmm. And she told me that there's this like old urban legend about where Kannagi's statue was placed. So remember how we said like the statue was holding an anklet, pointing with the other hand. So turns out that the statue was positioned in such a way that she was pointing directly at the LIC building in Chennai. And this is back like 1970s at some point when there was no other substantially tall building in that area. Actually, LIC building was the tallest building in the entire country when it first came up, and around that time. At least in Chennai, it was the tallest building as well. But in 1975, that LIC building caught fire.
Damn.
Yeah, so apparently there was like rampant rumors about, the building caught fire because Kannagi was pointing at it. You need to turn Kannagi away or something like that. But eventually it's just found out that it was some waste material in the basement that was not properly disposed. And that was the reason of the fire. So, but it was quite devastating.
Yeah, when you mentioned this to me while you were researching this, I looked up LIC building fire. And Chennai LIC building was not even the top 10 of LIC buildings that have caught fire. I found everything from Delhi to Jodhpur to Calcutta to Mumbai, Agra. I feel like it's the rite of passage for an LIC building to catch fire for some reason, which is super suspicious. It is an insurance agency.
Dun, dun, dun.
Indeed. And on that perfectly horrific note that you can research yourself, and we're not going to get into it any further. Thanks for tuning in this week to listen to this amazing story about this woman. Whether she's real or not doesn't even matter at this point because the story is so amazing.
Yeah, that's right. So, but before we go, we'd like to say, please follow us on Instagram. You can catch me at @just.nishful.thinking.
And you can catch me at ragi.dose. And I mean, those our handles are in the description. And also, you can find all our sources in our blog. So please go ahead and look that up.
And we'll catch you on the next episode of Misconduct.
See you guys.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market, and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Dugirala. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Do you wonder why China does the things that it does? Or want to know how we could improve online privacy? Or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy. If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.